So, what if the internet wasn't flat? I mean, really, what if it had depth and volume and could actually expand? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework called Webcash Universal that asks those exact questions. It's built on this radical idea called volumetric wealth, and honestly, it can completely change how we think about digital money and even digital space itself.
Okay, so at the very heart of this entire concept is one massive shift in perspective. Right now, we're all used to thinking of the internet like a flat map, a bunch of pages all linked together. Well, this framework just throws that idea right out the window. It says, no, imagine it as a volumetric field, a space that has depth and layers, kind of like an ocean you can dive into, not just a frozen lake you skate across.
And that immediately brings up a huge question. If our digital world suddenly has volume, what in the world does that mean for our digital money? A flat currency just doesn't seem to fit inside a 3D space, right? So what would money actually look like in a volumetric web?
Well, the answer this framework gives us is something called the Universal US Dollar, or UUSD. And you've got to stop thinking of it like a number in your banking app. Instead, you need to picture it as a living digital object, an animated property that's constantly being powered up by the web, and it's designed from the ground up to actually grow in value over time.
Now, to make this whole living quality possible, the USSS is described as having a tetrahedral, or four-dimensional structure. I know, that sounds incredibly complex, but think of it like a Swiss Army knife. It's one single object, right? But it has multiple tools or functions built directly into its design. It's not just doing one thing, it's designed to do four things all at once.
And here, you can see exactly what those four dimensions are. You've got the practical stuff, of course, a monetary function for everyday payments and a financial one for growing wealth. But then, it gets a little philosophical. There's a spiritual utility, which seems to be about connecting this asset to your own personal freedom and well-being. And finally, there's a taxmatic utility to automate tax payments. It's trying to be your wallet, your investment, and your civic duty, all rolled into one.
Okay, so a four-dimensional dollar. That's a pretty wild concept, but it begs the question, who actually creates this thing and where does it even exist? This brings us to the creator and the digital space they actually live in.
So this system introduces two key players you need to know about. The first one is the data valuer, and that's basically you, the human creator who actively cultivates this asset. The second is the self_marked_web space, and you should think of this as your own personal digital territory, like a homestead where your asset is born and where it grows.
So here's the crucial part. This web space isn't just an IP address. The source material describes it as a location that's defined by a unique mark left by its creator, almost like a bio-inspired scent trail. This mark allows the space and the asset inside it to be identified and even reconstructed from any point on the network. It's your own personal sovereign plot of digital land.
Now, a system this ambitious, you know it needs a rock-solid foundation. So what's the digital bedrock that secures all these personal web spaces and the assets that are growing inside of them?
That foundation is called the G-ledger, or global ledger, and it's described as the next step beyond blockchain. So while blockchain tracks transactions on a flat chain, the G-ledger acts more like a global land registry. It's designed specifically to record ownership, and this is the key, the location of assets within this 3D volumetric web.
This quote from the source material really just nails it. The G-ledger is the anchor. It's the administrative layer that gives every single digital object a verifiable origin point, a location, and an identity in time and space. For the first time, digital objects would have a true home address.
And what's fascinating here, as you can see, is that while these ideas feel really futuristic, they're actually grounded in real-world enterprise technology. The architects of this system are clearly pulling inspiration from things like Oracle databases, using concepts for identifiers and monitoring tools. It's a clear attempt to root this wild, abstract theory in some established database logic. Okay, now for what is probably the most mind-bending part of this whole thing. If this digital space actually has volume, how does it grow? This is where the framework pulls from theoretical physics to explain the actual mechanics of digital expansion. So the physics here is based on a concept called the single field theory. Don't worry, we are not going to get too deep into the weeds, but the basic idea is that all of space-time is one big interconnected field, kind of like a giant web where a vibration in one spot can be felt everywhere else.
This framework just applies that same logic to digital space, treating it as a dynamic field that can grow.
And the expansion of this digital field is described by a really simple, elegant mathematical relationship, a ratio of 1 to 2 to 3.
So what does that actually mean? Well, for every 1 unit of linear expansion, think of that as new data pathways being created in the G-ledger, you get 2 units of superficial expansion, which means the surface area of the network grows. And that, in turn, creates 3 units of volumetric expansion, generating new digital depth and new layers. It's like watching a flat map literally inflate into a globe, adding a whole new dimension of space.
So after all that, a volumetric internet, 4D money, digital homesteads, the literal physics of expansion, let's bring it all back down to earth. What does this all actually mean? What is volumetric wealth?
Well, it boils down to 4 huge shifts in thinking. First, digital depth. We'd stop surfing the web and start diving into it. Second, vertical sovereignty. Owning digital property is no longer about the surface area you have, but the volume you control. Third, and this is wild, time as capital. This system proposes a market where time itself becomes a tradable asset. And finally, a totally new economics, where value is something you cultivate and grow, not just something you buy and sell.
All of this ultimately leaves us with a really profound question to think about. If we accept the premise that the internet has volume, that it has depth and can actually grow, what does that truly mean for our ideas of digital ownership, sovereignty online, and the very definition of what wealth is in the 21st century?